SaWGuy podcast.
Like scary movie. What's your favorite scary movie?
Here's Johnny.
We'll tear your soul apart.
The boogeyman is real, and you found him.
Game over, man. Game over.
What do you want?
I want to hear you scream. From the front time, bitch.
Welcome to the SaWGuy podcast. As always, I'm the SaWGuy, and I'm bringing you episode 22 on Silver Bullet. That's right. So I know a lot of people, they ask me, what the fuck is Silver Bullet? Because it was one of those films that you would think it did good for its time, but it completely bombed in theaters. But it has this cult following because there's a lot of great fucking acting in it. And I know this film is based off Stephen King's work, obviously. The book that it was based off of was Cycle of the Werewolf. And that was basically the same story. Obviously, you know, when you go from a book to a movie, during those times, they twisted up a little bit. You know, they had to make it more Hollywood. And there's not that much difference between it, honestly. Just a little bit, but not a whole lot, you know? But anyways, if you've never seen Silver Bullet, I recommend see it. I know it's usually always on Hulu, Netflix. For sure, you could find it in the $5 bin somewhere on DVD. I know they do the Stephen King pack where that's included with Pet Sematary, Thinner, and a bunch of other Stephen King cult classics. But this is one of my favorite films, honestly. And I had to do this one because everybody, when I did the fan request episode, this was in the top. I was surprised. I was like, wow, okay, you know, us true horror fans, you know, we're starting to realize that this was a damn good film, right? But anyways, if you haven't seen it, check it out. As always, I'm going to break it down to you, the whole movie and everything like that. This movie stars Corey Haim, and I believe this was his first acting role. He was a kid, and he's basically the main character in this film. You have Gary Busey, who plays the uncle, and you also have Everett McGill, which is not a common, you know, household name, but he's done some other works. Like he was, I think his name was Big Daddy off of People Under the Stairs. That was another classic one, but right now we're talking about Silver Bullet. But anyways, Everett McGill, he does these really good creepy roles. And basically this whole movie, it was filmed in 1985, or released in 1985, but when they did the story, it takes place in the 70s, right? So the whole story is this. It takes place in a town called Tarker Mills, which in the Stephen King universe, that's a stone throw away from this little town called Derry. I'm pretty sure you guys might have heard it from this story called It. Yeah, it's down the road from it because it's in Maine. Which is crazy. I was like, what? Mind blown. But anyways, back to the story. It follows his family, and they live in this small town of Tarker Mills. And everybody's all tight-knit to each other, you know, because it's the 70s and things like that. And, you know, the whole movie starts off where they go to a parade. They're talking about how they're raising funds for the town. You see the reverend, the sheriff. And there's a lot of central different themes that this movie follows. Obviously, Corey Haim's character, he plays a kid who's bound to a wheelchair. Some have said that he's a paraplegic. I have a theory on that, which I will get towards the end of this video, because there's a lot of different subjects and themes that I notice. I've seen this movie 7 times this week to do this episode, so I got a lot to talk about. But anyways, the whole story goes is that it's Corey Haim, and he has a sister, Megan Follows, who plays the character of Jeannie, and he has a friend named Brady. And, you know, the movie starts off where the parents, they rely a lot on Jane to take care of Marty, which is Corey Haim's character. And, you know, they put that theme on her, like, hey, he's bound to a wheelchair, you gotta help out your brother, he's your baby brother, right? So it starts off that, you know, they say, hey, go look for him, see if he's okay. And Marty, he's out there hanging out with Brady, and they decide to play a trick. They found a garden snake, or a garter snake, whatever it was, and they throw it at her, so she falls into the puddle, fucks up her dress and everything. While this is going on, she goes to the side bushes, and she sees this character who pulls this dude away, and she's basically saying, hey, I'm pregnant, it's your baby. And this guy, being a cheeseball piece of shit, that ain't my baby cooking in your oven. That's not my bun, you know. Handle it yourself. And it shows her crying. You'll get to that later on in the story. So anyways, after everything's all done, they're driving back, and then This is what I love about the 80s films. You know, they actually show parents actually disciplining. You know, so she's arguing. They're on the drive back. Marty and Jane, they're arguing. And basically she's saying, well, look what he did to my dress. You know, he scared the shit out of me. Da-da-da-da-da. And the parents are saying, well, that's your baby brother. You got to take care of him. Well, it's not my fault he's crippled. And then that's when the mom turned around and said, you better knock it off or I'm going to smack you. That was back in the day. And my generation, we had that. You know, I always chuckle at that shit. But anyways, they get to the house, and they're unloading and everything like that, and she's basically saying, well, the uncle that you like, he's a drunk, and he's getting a divorce, which is Gary Busey's character. He plays Uncle Red, which is their mom's brother. And basically, it goes on, you know, about their life and everything like that, but, you know, I completely just missed the beginning. Damn it. But anyways, in the beginning, I'll go through it real quick. In the beginning, you see this drunk, he's on the railroad, and he fixes the railroads and shit, and all of a sudden he sees this werewolf, and it cuts his head off. And then no one expects anything, because, you know, they thought he just laid on the tracks, he's a drunk, whatever. Then you had the whole town scene, and then now we're all caught up. So anyways, now it starts talking about how that there's this murder going on, right? And then it goes back to the scene of the lady who says, hey, I'm pregnant. And she basically, they never implied it in the movie, but I think they talk about it in the Stephen King book, that she said that she was going to kill herself because the guy didn't want her, and she has this baby that nobody wants, you know? So she's in her room, and she's already got all these pills laid out and everything, and she was already, you know, drinking it and ready to kill herself, and all of a sudden this werewolf-like creature comes up, boom, boom, climbs up, busts through the window, guts her and shit, and, yeah, I was like, whoa, what the fuck? And the way that they put that together was just creepy. Because it doesn't show you a full body apparition or a full body look of the werewolf. But you know it's a werewolf, obviously, because of the movie and everything like that. Or, you know? But anyways, after that scene, then they start, you know, Marty goes back to school. He talks to his buddy and everything. He has a little girlfriend named Tammy. He walks Tammy home because the sheriff is like, hey, there's a string of murders going on. We're a small town. Something's going on. Be careful, right? He takes her home. And anyways, when he takes her home, she has a drunk dad. You know, like half the characters in this film, they're either drunks or they're crazy or something, you know. That's another thing that I'll get to. But anyways, he's over there telling her, Tammy, you need to go and help your mama with supper. Or I think it was with laundry or something like that, right? And then he doesn't like the fact that her friend, Corey Haim's character, Marty, that he's a cripple. Well, not cripple, but bound to a wheelchair. I say cripple because right after, you know, she walks away from him, he says this line, damn cripples, all they ever do is just go on welfare, and mumbles off, you know, which implies that he's a drunk, and, you know, he doesn't do much, you know, around the house, obviously, right? But before she walked in, she says, hey, my dad has a greenhouse, I've been hearing growling noises in there. So later on, it follows the story of Marty going back home, and then you see Uncle Red, which is Gary Busey's character. They're playing poker. He's obviously drinking. He's drunk. They're talking shit, having a good time. And then basically the mom shuts it down, sends him to bed, and she's yelling at Gary Busey's character saying, you know, what the hell? I don't want you drinking around him when you're around. And, you know, they have a little bickering. Well, later on it goes into Tammy's dad, and this is late night. This is one of my favorite scenes of this fucking film. He gets a beer and he starts watching wrestling. And I can relate to this because I'm a wrestling fan, right? This shit was funny. He's sitting there, oh, come on, Rebel, we're going to kick some ass today. And as he's, you know, on the TV, drinking a beer or whatever, he starts hearing all of his pots in his greenhouse start to break. And all of a sudden, yeah, bust his chops. And I guess they show a part where he got kicked, you know, below the belt or whatever, you know. Ooh, that hurts my parts. And then he hears more pots break. He gets all pissed off, grabs his gun, and he doesn't use a full shotgun shell. He uses, what do they call it? Those mouse shots or whatever. So it's like rock salt. That's what it is. Goes out there all drunk, you know, bust up my pots, I'm gonna bust up your ass, you know. He goes in there, and they did this scene fucking phenomenal, right? They go in there. Well, he goes in there, and I think his name was Milt. Was it? Yeah, Milt. And, well, anyways, he goes in there. It's all dark. He sees all of his busted, you know, terracotta plants and everything like that. He goes in, he starts hearing noises, he sees a spider, scares him, builds up, then this whole rusty shack starts shaking, and then all of a sudden the werewolf comes out, boom, from the bottom, and pulls him into the ground. As he's going to the ground, there's a sharp piece of wood, and it goes right through him. And then he leans forward, leans back, blood's gushing down, and then you hear the werewolf noises and all the tearing and shredding. Great scene, great scare, everything, right? Then later on, they go into, like, okay, now there's a second murder, we all gotta be careful, right? And then, obviously, the kids weren't careful because Marty, he goes and hangs out with his friend Brady, who, basically, he's his friend, but he's one of those friends like, oh, if you're here, okay, cool, if not, whatever. So they're at the park flying kites, and this one I thought was fucked up. Here he is bound to a wheelchair, and his friend's still flying his kite. Doesn't help his friend, Marty, get the kite stuck out of the tree. So Marty climbs up this tree and pulls his kite out. His sister comes and says, hey, you better get your ass home. Supper was an hour ago. Mom's pissed. She picks him, well, that doesn't pick him up. She helps him into his wheelchair, and they leave. And basically, it goes into the story of, like, he's telling his friend Brady, hey, are you going to come? He's like, yeah, in a bit, I'll be fine. And it just shows this long scene where he's, like, staring at him like, something's not right, something's going to happen. And you do find out what happens. Then it cuts into the bar scene where the whole town is drinking, and then you have Andy, who's the guy who, basically, he owns a gun shop in the town, but not the only one. But he's like this big, think of him like Bert from Tremors. That's basically what he is, right? And he starts arguing with the deputy, and they start talking shit, calling him a fat ass and all this other stuff. You know, typical bar scene, right? And then all of a sudden, Brady's dad comes in, and out of all things, I never understood why he would go to a bar and say, hey, has anyone seen my kid? I think he went in there because I guess everybody was all at the bar because it's a small town, right? Then it cuts to the scene where Brady's flag is being dragged and it has it has blood draining off of it. And the Sheriff Holler, he's dragging it and he's saying a prayer. And they never showed what he looked like, you know, as far as Brady. And they never said why the sheriff was out at that spot because the park looked like it was way outskirt of the town. But he basically, I guess, was going on patrol because his dad, Herb, was telling him, hey, my son's missing, you know. And back in those days, if somebody was missing, you know, in a small town, they all hauled ass. Well, anyways, Herb gets dropped off by the other deputy, and the sheriff is, like, trying to stop him, and then he goes and sees his son. And, you know, then it's a very dramatic scene. Then it cuts into the funeral, where they're doing the funeral for everything. And it's sad. It really is, you know, because it builds character into it, and then it's like, makes you think, oh shit, this is a problem. Then, after the funeral scene, Gary Busey and Marty, they're really close. And he tells the family, okay, he's going to drive with me back home. We're going to find out, we're going to talk, really, whatever, you know. And so they do. And so later on, after everything's all done, and they start talking about things, and Marty's like, well, I think it's a werewolf. And obviously, you know, typical 80s films, they laugh it off. Oh, yeah, that ain't a werewolf, right? And then it shows the scene back at the bar where Andy, the gun guy, or the gun shop owner, he's basically telling everybody, hey, I don't give a shit, we're going to all round up a crew, and we're going to go out there and hunt this motherfucker, right? As they're doing that, the sheriff comes in and says, hey, y'all need to go home. What you're doing is private justice. It's a step away from lynch mobs and shit. Y'all gotta go home and be safe. And while they're all arguing, bickering, you see Brady's dad, Herb, stand in the corner, and he tells him, yeah, shut up. And then he tells the sheriff, hey, you know, that's fucked up. You haven't done anything. My son was torn to pieces. So I don't know what you're talking about with private justice, but I'm gonna go out there and get private justice. Alright? While this is all going on, they all said, okay, fuck it, let's go. So they're all running out to their cars with their guns and shit, ready to go. You see the Reverend come out, right? That should have been a big clue. The Reverend comes out, hey, don't do this, no. And as they get to the forest area, I guess they all split up in different groups. And they show that they're in the forest. One guy gets injured because he steps on a bear trap, and the guy's trying to take it off, and it snaps right back to him. Then they go in, and Andy, he's trying to be, you know, big tough guy, be the leader of the boss. And he has the bar owner, and he has like a diner shop owner. There's another funny scene. The diner shop owner and his wife, you know, they're kind of bickering. She's like, you gonna stand there and make lemonade in your pants all day? You gonna come? I ain't scared. So they go in, and he's the only smart one that tells them, hey, you can't trust this fog. like, it's because it's deep, you know, because this whole movie takes place from spring all the way to Halloween. And in Maine, they'll, like, in the little forest, swamp areas, you'll have fog that builds up, you know. And well, anyways, when they did that, they got into the fog, they start hearing the noises, and they said, it's right behind us. And then everybody else is like, okay, we should start packing up and get going. Boom! There's one guy that gets thrown to a tree, gutted up, right? And then they said, okay, let's start moving little by little. And then he gets the other guy, pulls him down, and just basically severs him. Everybody starts running. Andy freaks out so bad that he shoots his gun and says, okay, fuck this. So he's gone. And then the other guy, I didn't talk about this guy, but this guy, he was the old guy that was in Reservoir Dogs. He was the old man that planned everything. He's that actor. I forgot his name. But anyways, in the scene, he owns the bar, and then when people would get pissed off, he pulls out this bat, and basically he's like, hey, knock off the thermostats. And everybody remembers that bat because the bat, on it, he has it etched where it says, the Peacemaker, right? He's running away from the forest. He's the last one that gets killed, gets tripped up, and you hear him, you know, you son of a bitch, I'm gonna kill you. Whoosh, whoosh. Hits him with the bat, and then basically the werewolf comes back, grabs the bat, and just beats the shit out of him with it. Right? Great scene, great build-up, and then we go into the funeral scene, or you think it's a funeral scene, right? Then all of a sudden the priest starts talking, and there's 3 caskets because of the 3 guys that just got killed. And then you start seeing Brady's dad, and he starts talking about, oh, you know, there's only private justice. And then everybody starts little by little transforming into werewolves. The lights go out, everything goes out, and then you see the fucking people are all fucking werewolf-like coming after the Reverend Lowe. And that scene always scared the shit out of me as a kid because, you know, back in the day when you used to get, like, free HBO, free Showtime, we didn't have, you would get it for a month, right? And the generation I grew up with, we basically said, fuck it, we're going to get a 6-hour tape, pop that shit in the VCR, hit record, and record all those movies. I know I'm not the only one that did that. Let me know in the comments below if you guys did that, because that shit's funny. That's old school. That's how you know you're a true old school horror fan, right? But anyways, back to the movie. I know right after that scene was going on, all of a sudden you see that he wakes up, it's a dream, ah! And then he's basically saying, like, Lord, let this pass by. So basically it implied that he knew that he was the werewolf and he can control it, right? Then later on it shows into the story where Marty's family, they have a barbecue. Gary Busey, he builds them a bike called the Silver Bullet, which is the base of the whole movie. And, you know, he builds them this fast, well, it's a motorized wheelchair that he put a bike engine in, so it's basically super fast. So he tests it out, they have a barbecue night and everything. Everything's going good, he's not drunk. And then he tells Marty, hey, I know they canceled the carnival, they got your girl to move away, he killed your best friend, but I got something better for you. So he gives him fireworks, right? And says, hey, stay close to the house and, you know, don't run off and be safe. So he implied not to do it tonight, but what do kids do our age, right? We said, fuck it. He climbs out of the house, gets into the Silver Bullet, goes to the bridge, and starts lighting off these fireworks. Lights off these fireworks, then all of a sudden, the werewolf comes. He starts freaking out. He gets the bottle rocket, boom! Gets it right in his eye. And right after that, that's when he notices there's a werewolf. He tells Jane. Jane's looking around to see who has a missing eye because she's collecting cans for the MedQ drive. She finds out it's the Reverend who has a missing eye. He has an eye patch, right? And then later on, they figured, okay, we're going to send him notes saying to kill himself. Then the Reverend kind of goes crazy, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He goes and tries to run off Marty on a bridge and everything. And then when they're telling the story again to Gary Busey, he's like, oh, you guys are full of shit. And then all of a sudden he tells them, wait a minute, what color is his car? And then he sees the paint transfer. Tells the sheriff goes over there and says, okay, I see the broken piece of bat, and I see that there's paint transfer, you're going to come with me. That's when you full-on see the Reverend basically knock the gun out of his hand, it's not my fault! And then he starts transforming into the werewolf, hits him in the head with the leftover piece of the bat, and then full transforms, kills the sheriff. And then that's when they decide, okay, fuck it, we're going to make a silver bullet out of our cross necklaces and our medallions. And, you know, Gary Busey, he's like, okay, I love you guys, I'll do it for you. So he goes and does that, they make a silver bullet, and, you know, at this time, it's around Halloween. The full moon's out. The parents are out of town. And this is the big climax ending where finally the werewolf comes, tears through the house. Gary Busey's all shocked and shit. And, you know, they start fighting and everything. He pulls out the bullet before everything happens because he's like, okay, he's not going to come. It's already 3 in the morning. Little did he know, right? But he comes. They lose the bullet in the vent. Marty reaches in, grabs the bullet, pulls it out, loads the revolver. Boom! Gets him. And then you find out at the end that it was Reverend Lowe. Like, all the characters finally realize that they see him transform from a werewolf down to a human. There's that one last jump scare, and then that's it at the movie, right? That's the whole movie of Silver Bullet. I know I probably went a little bit longer than I should, but there's a lot of great memorable scenes. It's not iconic, but they're very memorable. If you tell anybody about Silver Bullet, they'll tell you they remember, you know, the making the lemonade in the pants, or they remember the Peacemaker bat, or they remember, you know, Gary Busey's character who does all the crazy shit. Because Gary Busey in this film, a lot of his lines were all improv. You know, they were just on the spot, you know. There's this funny scene where he's starting up the Silver Bullet for me, and he tells him, oh, I feel like a virgin on prom night. You know, all that shit wasn't in the book. He just kind of ad-libbed it just because Gary Busey's Gary Busey, and he just does crazy shit like that, right? But it was a great movie. It really was. And the whole time, what made it even that much more special is you never see the full werewolf until the end. And a lot of people will give you shit about this. And they said, okay, well, that doesn't look like a werewolf. That looks like a fucking bear. And true, they're right. You know, because during production in this film, they filmed all the scenes without the werewolf. And, you know, after all those scenes were done, then they got the suit. And they said, okay, well, shit, this suit is very hard to move. So the guy, Everett McGill, who played Reverend Lowe, he basically got a dual role in this film because no stuntman wanted to get into the suit because it was just so tight and awkward to move, right? But it's the way that they did the camera angles, and then they did all the Stephen King little winks where they zoom in on the eyes and then the eyes will glow red. And that basically, I know that's a Stephen King trait because that has happened in Creepshow. Creepshow, when they show the bamboo and it zooms in on his eyes and they turn all red, that's basically a Stephen King wink, right? But the werewolf suit, it looked very bear-like, but if you look at it from a stance that they tried to make it more realistic, it looked pretty damn good. You know, it's just, the transformation scenes were fucking fantastic. The way how, when he was changing from a werewolf back to a human, obviously they did it like, filmed it where it's like pushing out, and then they show the scene where it was rewinding and pulling it back so he goes back to human. It was all done really good, and a lot of the film's budget, if you look at the church scene where everybody transforms to a werewolf, you can see where a lot of the budget went. It didn't, and not only that, it wasn't gory. It had the right amount of blood when it was needed. You know, everything from when the sheriff got hit in the head with a bat to when they show the girl Stella, the pregnant woman, get killed. You know, they show the right amount of blood, not too much. You know, but not too little either. You know what I'm saying? But it was a great film, great story for what it was. And then I know I've posted on my social media, but I've come up with a lot of theories and themes of this film. I've watched this film, like I said, 7 fucking times. And I can tell you right now that I picked out every little theme. One, they show that even though Marty is bound to a wheelchair, he doesn't let his disability get to him. He doesn't. Not at all. You know? And that's the great thing. It basically, the film tells you, you know, don't let your disability or anything hold you down because you can do whatever the fuck you want, which I love because, you know, it's just, it's empowering. It really is. You know, the second scene that I noticed, or second theme I noticed was Reverend Lowe, the werewolf. He knew this whole fucking time that he was a werewolf, and he picked his victims. Even as a werewolf, he controlled that shit down to the wire. Because you think about it. He killed Stella because she said she was going to commit suicide, right? He admitted that when he got into a one-on-one confrontation with Marty and basically said, yeah, I killed her, you know, because suicide is a sin and she'd be burning in hell, but I took her physical life to save her eternal soul. And then that's when he says, you meddling little shit. And you think about all the other victims that he picked. Brady, what was it? It was Marty's friend, Brady. He picked him because he was a smartass, and he basically was a bully, they implied, right? The 3 people in the forest, he got those guys because they were the biggest assholes like in the town, you know, the bar owner who basically was this tough guy with a bat and everything like that. You know, he picked and chose his victims, which is fucked up to the point. And then, you know, he picked the sheriff, I would say, because he knew he was going to get caught. But then also, what implied to me how he knew he could control it is because when he went to go chase Marty in his car, and they had that car scene chase, you could tell he wasn't clean shaven. He didn't look like a reverend. He had the beard and everything, and he fucking snapped like Jekyll and Hyde. And I wouldn't go as far as say that's a Jekyll and Hyde movie, but I would go as far as saying this guy knew what he was doing. He thought he can get away with it, and he controlled it because they said, okay, he can come out during full moons, but he wasn't as strong and wasn't as human until the biggest full moon of the night. When those days hit, then basically he was like at his strongest. It was all werewolf, none of the Reverend Lowe. And also too, what I noticed, I don't know how to break it down without people getting upset. I'm not a religious person, but I did notice a lot of religious traits in this film. The fact that he was a reverend kind of implied, obviously, it's some form of Christianity. They didn't say if it was Christian, they didn't say if they were Catholic, they didn't say if they were Methodist or whatever, but you pick up on little clues. Like in the garage, they had statues, so that's Catholic. The fact that Marty had a medallion, that's more Catholic. So I don't know what type of religion it was, but to me, I almost got this cult-like feeling to it, especially like in the dream sequence where everybody's standing up and singing the hymns and they're just like rocking back and forth. You know, I've been at churches and I've never seen that, but I don't know if it was implied that religion played a part into this, you know, like it was more or less like, why was he doing the killings of these people? And because he's a reverend, was he doing it for the Lord's work, per se, you know? And that's another thing that I got to it. It's a controversial thing. I don't want you all to think that, you know, I'm bashing it out because I'm not, but it just implied in the story. I mean, like I said, I've seen this film 7 times this week, and I know if you pay attention to every little detail like I did in this, it's like, whoa, what the fuck, right? You know, because those are all the themes that I got off of it. I really did. But it's huge twist, and for this film, I don't know why it bombed. I mean, it was so great. The story was written really good. The cinematography was good. The acting of the characters was good. It's just, and it fit the time period. It really did. But at the same time, you know, if you're a Stephen King fan, you would know that this was going on at the same time as, well, no, this went after, because this was the 70s. This basically went on after the whole thing that went on with it, because Tucker Mills was next to, Derry. And Stephen King confirmed that through Twitter and everything. This was a couple years ago when he confirmed that everything is all tied into, like, one Stephen King universe, right? But it was just very odd, like, how everything was all put together so well, and it bombed. But obviously, with the power of VHS and everybody's word of mouth, before you had social media, this became a cult hit, and it still is a cult hit. Every year during Halloween, you know how they do horror movie themes, and, well, not horror movie theme, well, horror movie theme movie marathons is what I should say. You know, AMC does it, El Rey does it. Out of all their lineups, Silver Bullet is always in there. They'll always put in one Nightmare on Elm Street film, maybe one Friday the 13th film. They'll throw in one new one, like obviously my favorite Saw. But for the most part, you'll always see Silver Bullet in one of those because it's such a cult favorite of most people, because it's one of the best werewolf films ever made. And I will go down, hands down, and say that is the best werewolf film, to me, that has been ever made. I know, I'm going to see the comments below like, wait a minute, what the hell you guys talking, what are you talking about, you know? American Werewolf in London, you know, I know, shit, I can't even name all of them right now. I got so much Silver Bullet information in my head. It's crazy. But I honestly mean that because of the fact of, you think about it, they did this film in such a realistic way that how would people handle it? You know, especially at a time when it was in the 70s. You didn't have cell phones, you didn't have technology as big as it is, you know. Obviously, there's been some newer films that have been out that have been pretty good. I know a more recent one that I really like was Howl. That's a British film. And they're basically in a train, it stops and then werewolves attack them and shit like that. That's closest thing that's been really good to me. American Werewolf in London, I like that too. But you know, Silver Bullet holds a special place in my heart because growing up as a kid, I see this film so many times. We all quote it in my family. We all look at each other, bullshit. Hell, you know, half of us in my family, we all have a bat that says Peacemaker on it because of this film. I mean, not too many people can say that shit, right? But yeah, I mean, this is a great film. If you never got a chance to check it out, I mean, go check it out. And if you see any of the themes that I was talking about, the different motives that Reverend Lowe had, I mean, just let me know in the comments below, because I want to know what you guys think, because I know I'm anxious to hear why a lot of people would put this in their top 5, or is it one of their top favorites, you know? Most of the list, obviously, Nightmare on Elm Street 1, but there was another handful of lists that everybody would say Nightmare on Elm Street was their number 1, but they would put Silver Bullet as number 2. Some they would put Silver Bullet as their number 5, but others would put it like number 3. So I always saw this film like all around the list. And, you know, I'm just curious to know, did you guys enjoy the film? Did you love it? Did you see everything that I noticed in it? You know, because I picked up on it like quick after like the 5th time, but you know, watch shit on repeat, you tend to catch things, right? But anyways, thank you all for tuning in for episode 22. I'm glad you appreciate and enjoy this episode. And like I said, man, if I'm all done and I'm all out, you know what happens, right?
Bow down to the